Hey everyone, Shin here. So I finally found the time to put together the update video for the Sinister build. I know it's been a little while, I know a lot of you guys have been asking for it, but I've been fairly busy lately, with beta weekends and other various things in life. But I did finally find time to record this audio and slap the video together and all that for you guys. So without further ado, here's the update to the Sinister build, the 2.0 version. Alright, starting out with the utilities, as per usual, the build still uses Healing Signet, Balance Stance, Endure Pain, and Bulls Charge. However, unlike the previous version, the build uses Rampage. This synergizes better with Distracting Strikes, which I'll go over a little bit later. But just know that now you will be using Rampage instead of Signet of Rage. If you really want, you can use Signet of Rage, but I would recommend Rampage. For weapons, the build still uses Sword and Shield and Hammer. The stats of these weapons are the same as they were before. The Sword and Shield still uses Sinister stats, while the Hammer still uses Berserker. The sigils are also largely the same. The Sword and Shield still uses Torment and Hydromancy, and the Hammer still uses Sigil of Impact. However, I have actually removed the Sigil of Doom and replaced it with Sigil of Rage. Quickness being a boon now means it's a bit more plentiful. It can be increased by boon duration, and in general, I've found that it's a bit more powerful for the build compared to Doom. Doom is still viable, but the damage has been lowered because of the condition changes and the fact that poison can now stack. And the fact that you're no longer fighting as many celestial builds means the healing reduction isn't quite as useful anymore. So I feel the quickness and being able to hit your target more quickly, take them by surprise, land more CCs, is more beneficial for the build overall than the poison application. Alright, now before I go to traits, I do want to make special mention of the gearing because it is actually quite a bit different compared to what it was in the first version. The build no longer uses Sinister gear for all of its armor and trinkets. It now uses Carrion armor and Rabid trinkets. After the passive stats from each of the trait lines were removed with the specialization patch, the build lost out on a lot of the passive defenses that it needed before. So now I found that it forced me into using Carrion and Rabid to make up for those lost stats. The build, since it is a hybrid build and does rely a fair amount on condition damage, you need to be able to stay alive long enough for those conditions to take effect. So switching over to Carrion and Rabid means that you have those defensive stats that are otherwise lost, and it does help the build stay alive and stay in the fight immensely. It helps keeps your conditions ticking. It just helps you stay in the fight longer. It's very nice to have. I understand that this makes the build's name a bit of a misnomer because it's not really using the Sinister stat combo much anymore, aside from the Sword and Shield. But I still feel the name fits, considering the theme of it. You are doing sinister things to your opponent by keeping them locked down and applying a lot of conditions to them. So the name of the build isn't going to change at all. I still feel Sinister has some weight as being part of the build, but it's not going to denote the overall stat type that it has. It's just going to be more of a thematic name now. While I'm still on the topic of gear, I may as well tell you guys what the new runes are. The build now uses crate runes for more bleeding bonuses and a bunch of conditions when you go into Rampage. Alternatively, if you want to take advantage more of the confusion that the build is going to be throwing out, you can use runes of perplexity. Those are just as viable. It depends on where you want to put the emphasis. I prefer crate runes simply because they allow me to have more condition variety instead of having to lean so much on confusion. But perplexity is very powerful. Confusion is even more powerful than it was before the patch with the change to a ticking dot in addition to its old effect. So if you want to use perplexity, that is also a viable choice. It's a very strong choice. The build does not use Melandru anymore because we have the new Immobilize break on Warrior Sprint, which I'll mention when I go over the traits. So you don't necessarily need 100% snare immunity anymore. You can continue to use Runes of Melandru if you feel like it, but I would recommend switching to Runes of Crate or Runes of Perplexity for more damage. Now, since this is a World v World only build, I do need to mention the food as well. You can continue using Superior Sharpening Stones if you want. You can also use Tuning Crystals. Those work just as well. The food, you can continue using Lemongrass Poultry Soup if you want the condition reduction. If you want, you can use the Sweet Bean Buns if you have any left over from the Lunar Festival we had not too long ago. You can use Rare Veggie Pizzas. Those work well. Pretty much any power or condition boosting food is viable with the build now since you're no longer locked down by the snare immunity. So feel free to experiment, feel free to mess around. I personally still use Superior Sharpening Stones and Lemongrass Poultry Soup just because it saves me the trouble of messing around with different food setups and whatnot. I kind of just use the same 2 food for all of my builds in World. So either way, you can choose what you want to do with your food now. Alright, jumping into traits, you're going to want to take Strength, Defense, and Discipline for your specializations. Up in Strength, you're going to want to take Peak Performance. This is going to increase the power damage and reduce the cooldowns of Bulge Charge and Rampage. For the Master, you're going to want to take Body Blow. This is going to give all of your successful CCs Weakness and Bleeding application. This is very nice for synergy with your Crate Runes, and with the Bleeding application you get out of the Sword. And the weakness keeps your opponent from dodging as much and doing less damage to you. And finally, for the Grandmaster, you're going to want to take Distracting Strikes. This is the same as what the build had before, but after the condition changes, Confusion is more powerful, so it's very nice to have. It's a very nice boost to what the build had before. Down in Defense, you're going to want to take Shield Master. This is what the build had before in name, but now it's got a whole bunch of extra cool perks. It gives you Missile Reflection now. It will also give you Might whenever you block melee attacks with the shield. It's very nice to have for the build. It has the cooldown reduction that it had before as well. It doesn't have the toughness, but you don't really need that now that you have Rabid Trinkets, so the toughness is regained through that. For the Master trait, you're going to want to take Armored Attack. If you really feel like you need it, you can take Defy Pain, but I prefer Armored Attack just because it helps with the power damage of the build, and again, since you have more toughness from your Rabid Trinkets, you get more power. And finally, for the Grandmaster, you have 2 choices here depending on what you kind of want to be prepared for in World. If you feel like you're running into more CC-oriented fights, or you feel like you need to dodge more, you can use Last Stand. This is going to give you an extra balance stance, a bunch of vigor. It's going to increase the durations of all your stances, and it's a nice trait to have. It's very handy. Alternatively, you can go with the one that I'm sticking with, which is Cleansing Ire. This is nice for dealing with conditions and getting more adrenaline generation going. This allows you to use more flurries and Earthshakers. Overall, I'm preferring Cleansing Ire, but Last Stand is equally viable. Down in Discipline, you're going to want to take Warrior Sprint. This is going to give you the move speed boost that the build had before, as well as now giving you an Immobilize break whenever you use Earthshaker, Savage Leap, Bulge Charge, or any of the movement skills in the Rampage kit. Overall, very nice trait to have. It benefits you more than the other 2 traits in the Adept slot, so this is the one you want to take. For the Master, I'm going to say take Brawler's Recovery. Very nice for condition management, especially when coupled with Cleansing Ire. And finally, for your Grandmaster slot, all 3 are viable options. Merc Hammer, Heightened Focus, and Burst Master are all viable. However, the one I recommend for this build is Heightened Focus. The quickness allows you to take opponents by surprise by suddenly gaining quickness and being able to hit very quickly with your hammer. It allows you to get more CCs off more quickly. It allows you to apply more conditions quickly. It overall benefits the build more than the other 2, so this is the one I'm going to say work with for now. Alright, finally touching on the gameplay, the build plays very similar to the way it did before. It is very much a skirmishing build that you get in, deal damage, lock down your opponents, apply a lot of conditions. You want to be wary of when your opponent has things like Aegis or Stability, so your CCs are successful. You don't want to be throwing all of your CC into a Stability stack or wasting things like Backbreaker on Aegis. The more CCs that you can get to connect and be successful, the more confusion, bleeding, and weakness you're going to be throwing on your target. Overall, it's a good idea to just keep an eye out on your opponent's spoons, see what's there, and if they don't have anything that will stop your CC, take advantage of that. Rampage is a very nice tool to have for applying a lot of conditions as well, because a lot of that kit involves CC. And overall, just keep staying in your opponent's face. You have a lot of mobility to stick on them and keep applying pressure. And eventually, if you play your cards right, you will watch them slowly die to conditions while you smash their face in. Alright guys, and that is it for the update to the Sinister build. Hopefully you enjoyed the video and enjoy the new version of the build if you decide to try it out. The stat change for the armor and trinkets is a bit unfortunate for the name, but I'd still say Sinister is appropriate for what the build does. Applying a lot of conditions to someone while you are constantly CCing and doing a fair amount of power damage to them is a fairly sinister way of fighting people, as far as I'm concerned, so the name is going to stick for now. The build may go back to using Sinister gear in the future. We'll have to see how balance shakes out, but for now it uses Carrion and Rabid. Either way, hope you guys enjoy it, and with that I will see you in the next video or around the stream. Take care everyone.